of this stuff.
Yeah.
And we are live on YouTube, though, where I'm much less of a dork, apparently.
Yeah, but still be patient with us.
But still be patient. So, hi, guys. Obviously, it's been an interesting day here. A lot of us were watching the Derek Chauvin trial. I had been reporting on it from Minneapolis. You want to introduce yourself? I'm Nancy Rommelman. You're here in Paloma Media. And with
Hi, I'm Yael. I am a social media communications consultant for law enforcement. I was with the NYPD. And Nancy and I were talking about law enforcement a lot. Obviously, it's on everyone's mind, and what it's like to be on the front lines. And since I know some people who are working or recently retired, we thought, what better way to talk about this and just let them speak in their own voices.
Right. I mean, obviously, people are talking about Chauvin right now, and we will be talking about that. One thing that I reported on that a lot of you guys already know is I reported for the better part of the year from Portland. So that is a story I am continuing to watch. And the past couple of weeks have been pretty bad in Portland. They are, obviously there's been a lot of stuff going on. Hey, Aaron, we love you too. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the country, an incredible amount of gun violence, not just obviously amongst, police and citizens, but just in general. I mean, shootings are up all over the country. And Portland, as I've written before, is an activist city. They're very, very ready to be inflamed by the latest thing that happens. And they have been. And there has been some incredible violence in the city. And there was also a shooting in the city of a civilian who apparently had some mental issues. It really didn't have to do with protesting. So we want to talk a little bit about that, what we think is going to happen in the city. I have some pretty strong feelings that things are not going to die down. Maybe they're not going to get any worse. And we invite, as always, people to ask questions, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're an activist, whether you just have, questions that we might be able to elucidate. But we also have, and we're hoping the sound is going to be okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll let us know if it isn't.
We have a pretty special guest here tonight named Brett Barnum.
Brett Barnum was a sergeant at the Portland Police Department. He retired
January 19th.
Some would say right in time. And we'll call him up. You might remember him. He was in a viral photo a few years ago during Black Lives Matter protest where he was seen hugging a young kid who was protesting.
Devontae Hart.
Yeah, who also a tragic story
which was an incredibly tragic story, sort of right up my alley of the kind of stuff I write about. So Devontae Hart was one of 6 adopted children by 2 women. They were married. I believe they were married, and they'd been mothers to these children. But there had been sort of some things that really weren't publicized. They were seen as being extremely good parents, loving parents, adopting children, that needed parents. And there was this photo of Devontae being hugged by Brett, and it was like a symbol of Portland and unity and Black Lives Matter. And then I can't remember the date exactly, but they loaded the mothers loaded these kids into the car and drove them off a cliff. And everybody was killed. And actually, 2 of the bodies were never found. And I think Devontae was one of the bodies that was not found. So things are complicated.
Yeah.
People would like narratives to be simple, because if narratives were simple, then we'd know exactly where we stand and there would never be a problem, and you'd know, and it'd be so clear. But things are not clear. And I think that we are much, much better off sort of exploring from different points of view super calmly what might not be, the popular thing to say or the safe thing to say, or talking to people that really have completely different views than us and trying to understand. So one of the things we're doing, because Yael has, a lot of connections with law enforcement, we are speaking to law enforcement. I reached out to several activists today to see if they would either talk to me, or maybe tomorrow night, something we're doing on Clubhouse, we'll talk about a little later, because I really want to, when I saw that the Boys and Girls Club of Portland, again, had all their windows smashed last night, I really do want to speak to some of the people involved in these actions. And I really want to understand how they think this will make things better for, young boys and girls that need a place to go. So here we are.
Yeah.
Nancy, I was wondering if you knew about the heart story. I absolutely know about the heart story because it's a very, it's a very Nancy Rommelman story to write. So yeah.
So should we get Brett
Yeah,
on?
let's get Brett on the phone.
Yeah, so I love talking to cops because I find them very like unfiltered and especially retired cops. And kind of beyond the headlines, beyond the policy stuff. Let's just hear what this guy.
And he's also willing to speak on the record. I've interviewed a lot of officers lately, and they have to be anonymous for their work. They're not, authorized.
Hey, Brett.
Hello.
Hi, Ella Nancy here, and we're also on YouTube.
All right.
Guys, can someone tell me? I'm going to actually hold Brett. The phone is a little soft. Can someone here who's watching, can you hear Brett? Let's get a little sound check here. Someone check in here in the comments so that we know that, that his words are not being wasted, because you're a little soft on the phone, Brett. So, well, while we're waiting for somebody to comment, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are. Oh, they can hear it. Great.
How's this? Is that
Perfect.
any better?
It's not you, it's us. It's not you, it's me.
We have a beautiful studio here, but we don't know how to use it.
No, it's your phone. Okay. All right, Brett, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Brett Barnum. I was a police officer in the city of Portland for 27 and a half years, in the state of Oregon altogether for about 30 and a half years. And chose a career in law enforcement starting back in 1991. And the year I graduated college, and just wanted to be involved in public service. And having worked in Portland, especially through this last year with the pandemic and a handful of protest and unrest, community unrest, I still think it was probably the best career that I could have ever chosen.
Did the unrest have any influence on I know you said you left the force on January 19th, I believe. Did the unrest have any influence on your doing that?
No, there are some retirement dates that we'll just call them magical, that end up working out for long-term pension benefits on a particular day or month. And January happened to be a month, and I wanted to stick around up until the inauguration. I had my fill of doing protest events, and I knew that there would probably be another one on January 20th. So that's why I chose January 19th. And for anything larger than 30 years in public service in our retirement system in Oregon, it's not, let's say, profitable. It doesn't affect your pension at all. So a lot of our folks retire after 30 years or sometimes before, and they'll go seek employment elsewhere, just to try something else. So that was the only determining factor, is that it just happened to be a date that worked out to my benefit.
Brett, were you on the ground working the day after the election? I believe that was November 4th, because I was out that night with all the people breaking glass downtown. Were you working that night?
Yeah, and most of those nights where there was a substantial amount of civil unrest in Portland, we were either called back, our days off were canceled, or we were held over late, depending on what shift you worked. And so to specifically recall, without being able to look up on our scheduling system, which I don't have access to anymore, I'll tell you 99.9% yes, I was working that night.
Yeah. I think when we were speaking earlier, you were speaking a little bit about how, like other departments in the country, and somewhat impacted by the unrest, you're down manpower in the force.
Yeah, and our with the city of Portland, for a variety of different reasons, we have been losing officers. Good officers have been going to outside agencies, and whether they're in the local metro area of Portland or whether they're actually in a whole different state. But we had been in a slow decline of losing officers over the last probably 8 years. We had a short burst where probably about 6 years ago, where we actually started hiring and looking as though we were going to be back up to a acceptable staffing level. However, with some changes in administration, both at our city hall as well as within the police bureau, that took a drastic turn. and went the other direction very quickly, and we started losing folks again.
So you were saying something a little bit about Ted Wheeler, who people that don't know, Ted Wheeler is the mayor of Portland, who, as far as I'm concerned, because I was reporting in Portland when I still lived there on Wheeler, and it seemed to me, and I wrote about this several times for a reason, that he very much was trying to scan the arena and make the progressive element more happy, and that he got a pretty radical city council, and I think he painted himself into a corner. And you were talking a little bit about how he has not. I mean, how do you think he's done in terms of trying to keep the city safe? How about that for a broad question?
So I think he's jeopardized the city's safety for sure. The downtown core business area, along with actually several other areas throughout the city of Portland that have had spot periods of unrest, whether it's up in Northeast Portland, whether it's up in North Portland, or Far East Portland. These business owners and homeowners, community members, they adamantly talked, and we're out patrolling and we're out talking with folks, and we're still doing our job, and we're still engaging the community, and they're talking how they just don't feel safe. There's policing, and then there's political will, and you can't cross the two. And the problem with the city of Portland is it needs a city manager, a true city manager, and a true mayor. The problem is that there are city council people, and the mayor included, who are in charge of specific bureaus. And as the person in charge of that bureau, they're the ultimate reporting person, meaning that's who you have to report to. So our chief of police cannot police correctly, never has been able to, because the last person in line is somebody who's never been to a police academy, never really been to any significant police calls, doesn't have that policing experience, doesn't have that sort of engagement experience other than a political arena. And so you put that person in charge of a police bureau where there's supposed to be about 950 authorized sworn officers, and they begin making decisions based upon political reasons rather than true policing reasons. And for that, the city of Portland is not as safe as it once was. And case in point, we were having a very large spike in gang violence as well as gun violence. And part of that was keeping a lid on that, was we had what was called a gun violence reduction team. And this was a group of very well trained and very knowledgeable officers, probably about 20 with detectives in that group, 25 or so, that knew the players, they knew the problems, they knew the issues. And within a matter of probably 2 days, because it didn't fit the political will, it was disbanded.
Yeah. Same thing happened in New York here with the anti-crime team.
Instantaneously, we had a dramatic rise in gun violence.
I mean, as they have all over the country. One thing I just want to explain for listeners. So in Portland, the mayor is also the police commissioner. He's not the police chief, but he's the police commissioner. So when Brett is saying, the person that is in charge of this has never been to police academy, has never policed, it's because it's the mayor. And we did a couple of years ago have, we had a mayor who actually had been a former police chief. So, he maybe had a little, but he was pretty ineffectual. So I think Portland has had a string of pretty ineffectual mayors. And my theory on that is because, Portland was a blue dot in a red sea. So there was a tension that kept things sort of in balance. So like if there was ineffectual leadership in Portland, it was like, well, that's okay because people were pretty centrist. But then you had this giant influx, especially of young people to Portland. It became much more populated, much more blue, as does the local government. And so sort of axiomatically, policing has been considered sort of the enemy, maybe not axiomatically, but it has been considered not just by maybe Ted Wheeler, because as you said, he was kind of a narcissist as far as you were concerned, but by the city council. The city council has been very, very, anti-policing. They're the ones that took the money from the gun violence reduction team. And now Ted Wheeler, what is he doing? He's now asking for money back, and he's also trying to federalize certain local officers so they can actually make arrests and perhaps make them stick because the local DA who is elected just, 91% of any protest related crimes go unprosecuted. So there's no consequence in the city for these continual nights of violence. And I mean, I am not surprised. If you want to maybe tell that story you were telling us earlier about that one officer trying to take someone down with.
So yeah, I mean, we talk about systemic racism. We talk about, systemic this, systemic that. Well, within inside the police organization, there's a lack or a systemic lack of participation. Where once, when I first was hired, and let me categorize this. I started my career in the midst of Rodney King, and I ended in the midst of George Floyd. I had two terrible bookends in the middle of a great career. It doesn't mean that people can't learn from these things. We learned a lot from Rodney King.
Sure.
The policing world did. But what happens now is that where once back in the early 90s, we had a significant gang problem, and we went out and addressed it, and we were proactive. There is no proactive policing whatsoever anymore. The officers that are out there, one, partly because there isn't enough staffing. They're barely filling districts every day. And then the minute a significant incident happens, it drains all the districts to go deal with one incident. And that's for a protracted period of time, 3 to 4 hours. So where once we used to be proactive, now everything is retroactive to the point where it's actually getting dangerous for the officers. A story was given to me after I left where there's actually an investigation has been started internally, and it is not started by the community, by city council. It started internally by our own police officers who were dissatisfied with the performance of our own officers. And that's something that viewers really need to understand, is that, with all of this Chauvin talk and everything else, I think that the public, the community can see that officers step forward to report their own when there's something bad happening. And so in an incident that recently happened in Portland, there was one officer who was struggling with a suspect by himself. And as he got done and got this person into custody and used the minimal amount of force necessary to take this person into custody, he looks around and he starts counting. He goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I believe it was up to 5 other officers who were standing around just watching. And he looks at him and he goes, "Really, guys? Really? I'm struggling with somebody. I may have had to use a higher level of force because I wasn't able to overcome this person's resistance to me. And where if you would have helped me, we could have used less force perhaps, and everybody would have been safer, and I wouldn't, that officer would not have been jeopardized as far as their own personal safety." And so there is some, my understanding, some sanctions and some perhaps discipline to those officers that are just standing around. And that's what we've now trained our police to do. That's acceptable. And that's, in my terms, not acceptable. The community can't have that. They can't have an officer who just fills a car seat. They need to have an officer who's engaged, who's protecting them and also looking out to help stop crime that might be happening, not just sitting in their car waiting for the next call to happen.
Well, this is when I was in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago. I spoke with several officers, and they, my question was, what's happening now? What are, they're down almost 25%, whether it's people that have taken early retirement or people that are on PTSD leave. And there's not enough hands on deck to even answer 911 calls. And they are basically not interacting because they are afraid either A, if they wind up shooting someone, especially someone who is of color, the city's going to burn, or they're going to get fired. And so they're literally doing sort of the minimum, which is terrible. This is like, if you're,
It's not why people join the police
it's not why
department.
people join the police department. And, I am of the mind, just like I'm of the mind that, like, most chefs go into chef school because they want to be good cooks, right? Or you want to be a writer, so you go because you want to be a good writer. I think most, law enforcement, they go into law enforcement because they want to do a good job. Yes, of course, there are, just like there's shitty chefs and shitty whatever, there will be shitty cops. But most people are not in there for that. And that they, in this particular environment, can't do the job that they've, signed up for is pretty tragic for everyone, including the community.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
what-
if you have a community that's hungry and they come to the chef to make them a meal, but the chef has no tools, has no food, how are they supposed to eat? How are they supposed to feed themselves? How are they supposed to be nourished? And that's what's happening in policing right now. And that's what's happening. It's a byproduct of that is going to happen to the community. If you don't supply your officers with support and trust that your internal processes will take care of themselves correctly, right? That if somebody does do wrong, that they're held accountable. But if you don't supply them with the tools, with the resources, and with the adequate staffing, they're not going to be engaging. They're not going to be making that meal for the community. And the community is going to starve. And so there are so many good people in Portland, and we have about 200 folks that seem to come out nightly,
Right.
And causes damage,
Right.
causes havoc. And it's sometimes, it's right at the onset of an incident, and we don't even know what the facts of the incident are yet.
Yep.
And there's a very snap rush to judgment. And it's just like anything else. There was a process. The process served itself today, and a verdict was handed down. And there were 3 guilty verdicts handed down. But the process, the justice system, did its job, right? And so just as anything else, you have to let the processes work their way out in order to find out what the final income or the outcome is. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time, and we need folks to be patient.
So I'll play devil's advocate here for a minute, since I was on the ground a lot with these Portland protesters, and they're like, all cops are bastards, fuck the police, defund the police. And so I can imagine someone here is not here, maybe listening, but saying, well, yeah, I'm glad. I'm super glad that there are too few cops, and I'm super glad that, they can't do their jobs, because that's what we want. We don't trust the way they've done their jobs in the past. And they've done a terrible job because they're concentrating on the, I've said this, we don't report the good things that cops do. You report the bad things, just like everything else. You report, if it bleeds, it leads. So, what do you say to the people that are like, great, I'm super glad that the Portland Police Department is just like fleeing. What do you say to them?
So I would say that's more of a vocal minority rather than the silent majority. And overall, I think the silent majority needs to step forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a point in time where people have to come out from under their covers, and they've got to start showing their face. And if they truly want crime prevention, policing, if they truly want these things in their community and a level of safety, then they need to actually be more vocal than they are right now, in a positive manner, of course. But I get it, and you know what? It's really easy to sit back and go, okay, be careful what you wish for, right? Because they'll one day become a victim, and they'll one day want the police help, because it will be bad enough. Right now, they might be able to take a broken car window and go, I'm not calling the police. There's no reason for me to call the police. Nothing they're going to do for me. And they may do that. But one day they may get physically assaulted to a point where they have to go to the hospital, and they go, I need this person caught. I don't have the resources, the means, and they're going to need the police, and they're not going to be available.
Well, this happened the other day. There was a video online of someone I don't know exactly where it was in Portland. Might have even not been in Portland. It was definitely in Oregon.
Oregon, yeah.
And it was a dude who, got out of or was standing by his truck and he had a shotgun. I don't know what he had. Just a dude, an older, like white dude, shot his gun in the air. And I guess he was around some activists. I guess you couldn't really see them. They were filming it, but they were screaming, "Oh my God, somebody call the police." And it was like, well, wait a minute. Like, aren't you the ones that don't want them to call the police? But of course, we are conditioned, whatever the system that we've created, we are conditioned to call the police when there's, something like this, when we're frightened, when there's danger. And, even someone that, is marching for 200 nights in a row saying, fuck the police, when they're confronted with someone shooting a gun, they say, call the police.
And Brett, the day-to-day work at the end of the day in Portland is not, the protests are one thing, but there's regular jobs that you get, right? Like burglaries, domestic violence. What kind of level of policing of service are the people of Portland getting right now when all the resources and the attention and the political will is focused on the national stage, so to speak?
Well, right now, the way our call system works is calls are prioritized 1 to 7. Priority 1 to priority 7, 7 being the lowest, 1 being the highest, would be a person-on-person crime or an incident happening now with a potential catastrophic event tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so as it stands right now, oftentimes what happens is the field supervisors, they will tell the dispatchers fairly quickly once the calls start coming in, about 10, 11 a.m., and they stay pretty consistent throughout the day, and the call load stays consistent until about 2 a.m. They'll tell the dispatchers we're on 1s through 3s only, meaning priority 1, 2, and 3 only.
So if I call,
and so those lower level crimes, people will sit and wait 8, 10 hours for a police officer to respond. That has never happened in that I could remember, except for in the last couple of years. And that's after 30 years of doing police work. And that's not a good product for us to deliver to our community members. That's not a fair product. And so these people are calling us because they have been victimized, or they have been harmed, or they have a significant issue which is important to them, which needs to be addressed, and they don't have any other resources or any other thought process on how to address it other than calling 911 or our non-emergency number, and they expect us to come out. And we should be going out. We should be getting out there. But we can't because there are not enough resources.
Right.
And we have one city council person, Joanne Hardesty, who refuses to acknowledge it. And she has come up with this alternate idea about taking certain calls off our call load. She has spent, I don't know the exact number, but she has gotten several hundred thousands of Portland taxpayer dollars to put together this program. It hasn't even really been implemented yet. And it's been probably about a year and a half now since this funding started. There's nothing to show for it. And it just, people have advised her and told her, this is not going to work, because what's going to happen is she wants to send these people to people with mental health crises, and they're kind of a rapid response team for folks with mental health issues.
Right.
Well, as we quickly saw in Seattle about 8-9 months ago, they had a program like this. Guess what happened? That mental health professional was killed, was stabbed to death.
Jeez.
Because they're unarmed, they're not prepared, and what they do have is an innate ability, just as a lot of police officers do, to de-escalate, but they don't have an ability to protect themselves. And so now you've tied up resources, again, police resources, to go deal with now a homicide with a mentally ill person. And so it's one of these situations where, as you just said a few minutes ago, people will call those people who don't want 911, i.e. Joanne Hardesty. She was the first one to call 911 when she felt she was being treated unfairly because an Uber driver asked her to step out of the car because she wouldn't put a mask on or roll down the windows.
Yeah, and because he picked her up at the wrong entrance or something. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was so
It
absurd.
was so
that,
trivial. However,
I know.
that minor trivial incident caused her to say, I'm calling the police.
Right. Because she's
And-
also
and the
showing her
police said,
power. Yeah.
There's not a lot we're going to do for you. Get out of the car.
Oh, right. And which is exactly what they should have done at that point. It's like if I called them and say my oven's too hot. It's like, well, lady, turn down the freaking oven. Like this is not our responsibility.
But basically, if you're in Portland now and your car gets broken into, your business, or somebody's your house getting broken into, but the perpetrator left, you're basically fucked. Like, excuse my language, but you're not going to get the police service that you deserve as
You're
a
not
resident.
a priority.
No.
If that person is not in your house and you physically know, and you tell the dispatcher, no, I think they're gone, or I saw the dark shadow walking off. Okay, we'll send an officer out. You won't get an officer perhaps up to an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. That person's been traumatized. As a long-term officer and gone to many burglary calls and have seen many people who have been victims of this, they're traumatized. They have never experienced an intruder in their home, their domain, their place of safety. And now they've had somebody walking through their house, whether they were mentally ill, a transient, whatever. It's still an unknown person. It's very disturbing. And they want somebody to tell them it's all right. We're going to do our best to find them, but they want them there now. Because everybody that's close to them in their circle is already with them at their house. They need that external piece to tell them it's going to be okay. Or let me get some forensics going. Let me get our criminalists out here to find some fingerprints, or let me go knock on your neighbors' doors to see if there's videos, surveillance from Ring cameras, from, all sorts of, different security systems to see if we can get an idea on who this person is. Let me get an officer there to get a better description so that we can get more officers there to patrol the area to see who doesn't fit in that neighborhood right now. And maybe we'll find that person. We can't do that anymore.
I may be giving the Black Bloc and Antifa, like the what you said, the 200 that come out every night, or 600 or whatever it is, because we've seen them in various numbers. I may be giving them too much credit, but one thing that I had happened this summer after that guy had been pulled out of his pickup truck downtown and kicked in the head. I was out the next night with some Black Bloc kids, and one of them said, the police should have been there. And I said, the thing is that the police are out chasing you guys every night and stopping you from burning down the police union or this particular area or breaking into someone's house or whatever it is. So, if we've got 100 officers over here, that's 100 officers that can't be downtown protecting that guy. And he said to me, well, they should still be down there. And I wonder, I may be giving them, again, too much credit, but I wonder if one of the goals of the people that continue to protest every night, besides just like that nightly spurt of relief that comes with breaking stuff and setting things on fire, is to make the police look bad. Like they will take up your time and your energy and call you to certain locations so that Mrs. Smith out in Gresham or wherever in East Portland can't get her break-in taken care of. So the police continue to look bad. And then they're hoping like, well, see, we're against the police. Now Mrs. Smith is going to be against the police too, because they can't service her. Do you think that that's part of their agenda?
If it is, it might have served a purpose for the first 90 days. Now, the silent majority, they're seeing right through this, and they see exactly what's happening, and
Yes.
they know why we're taxed. They know exactly why. They come downtown. They've seen all the board ups. They can't go to their favorite restaurants or don't want to. They don't want to ride our light rail train because it's dangerous at certain times of the day to ride it in through downtown because these riots might be happening. The folks that live up in North Portland near the union office, typically I would say that they're more on the left-leaning side. They would probably, folks in that area are good people. I've worked those neighborhoods a ton throughout my career, and I enjoy getting to know those parts of the community. But I would also say that at the beginning, there were a handful of those folks that were downtown. And they were either watching, spectating, cheering on, maybe not specifically engaging, but they were interested. And it probably felt right to them. I don't think that it feels right to them now.
100%.
And that's just my speculation on it.
No.
I absolutely do not speak for that larger part of the community in that part of the region or in different parts of Portland. However, by this point, if they really, I do have several friends that do live in Portland from college, from high school, and whatnot. And I've talked to them, and they're done with it. They're done with
That's
it.
right.
And I've had a ton of friends that they're moving. They're leaving.
No,
And they're moving to the suburbs.
that's right.
And part of the reason they're moving to the suburbs is because home prices are astronomical in Oregon right now. There are still people that want to move into Portland, and they can get rid of their house with a great profit fairly quickly, and they can go move to the suburbs where they don't have to listen to the nightly violence. We have officers that live in some of these areas that can hear the loudspeakers of the PA. I had one officer that worked for me directly who lived fairly close to our union office, and he would show up in the morning for roll call, and he'd go, "Yeah, I was up till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning to hear that loudspeaker all night." And and if that's him, I can't imagine what the other community members who don't understand what's going on, what they're feeling like.
Well,
why does this always have to happen in my neighborhood?
I wrote about the sort of the when they were setting the police union on fire, and then they ran down North Denver and they set the picnic tables on fire. That nice little walking district that the business owners had created. And I spoke with a lot of people in the neighborhood who were like, "This is unacceptable." However, some of their neighbors at the time, this was in August, I think, were like, "No, we support these young people. We support them, and go young people, go." Well, 3 months later, it was kind of like, maybe not go young people, go, because we're really tired of this every night, and now we're also tired of you marching down our streets and shining lights in our windows. And I think, and I've written this 1 gazillion times, if the activists doing this every night were busting a new move or building something, then maybe the community would be interested. But it is literally the same thing every night. And the community's like, "Well, I kind of supported you because I thought you had a message, but in fact, your message seems to stop at set fire, break window, throw poo." Like there's no next step here. We've seen it now literally almost every single night for a year. It's like, we can't support this anymore. You're not actually building any sort of new utopia. You're just destroying what is here. And I think the community is done. I mean, that's my impression. I don't see there's a lot of support for it anymore in Portland.
And the greater part of this, I have a couple of very, very good friends that operate restaurants in downtown Portland that have been there for 4 to 5 decades. And they've been family owned forever. Not only did COVID just absolutely obliterate them, and they weren't set up for takeout, and they had a retool for takeout stuff. Once they finally started getting reopened and these protests continued to happen, or even before COVID when protests were happening, I would get phone calls. "Hey, is there a protest tonight? Is there, what do we know? I got to be able to tell my staff." And a handful of them have already moved. They're done. They're gone. They've closed up shop. We had one very good restaurateur in Portland who owned like 6 or 7 different restaurants.
Who's that?
He closed everything.
I know a lot of the restaurateurs.
And he had the one very nice restaurant there at 6th and Clay.
Okay.
6th and Columbia. There was one of his restaurants, and he was like, "I can't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to come to, and I can't be pulled 9 different directions for causes when they're destroying my way of life. I have to get back into something that will actually, albeit I'm a supporter, and I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that's going on, as far as policing and everything else. But I can't have these antics happen every night." Another friend of mine, his family owns the Standard Building downtown. And they just 2 or 3 nights ago, I guess it was Friday night, this last Friday, another $20,000 worth of windows broken.
this
that
is
they have to repair.
this is the thing. How
Yeah.
many times can you get your windows broken? And you're trying to do business and you're trying to like support employees. And it's like, I cannot do this every 3 days. Like you just at a certain point, you just can't pay for it anymore. And what is it for? It really is. We called it Groundhog Night, right? Is that Groundhog Day, Groundhog Night? It's like
Groundhog's Day.
it's like,
yes.
but it's every night. It's every night. It's the same thing. And I think you're absolutely right. And we won't hold you too much longer. I mean, it does. I mean, where does it come from? Where do you think the change? How obviously the people need to speak. The people need to say, no more. We are not doing this anymore. Do you think that the leadership in Portland is going to listen? And I think Ted Wheeler already, I mean, he's already changed his tune from last summer.
So here's my 2 cents with Ted Wheeler. And I know him very innately. I mentioned to you earlier that before he was mayor, he and I and another mutual friend all sat down and he asked me about the police bureau. He was doing his research and his homework on the city before he became mayor. So I had a personal friendship with him that was very different in the sense that when I was in uniform at work, it was business. He was the police commissioner. Away from work, I'd have a cup of coffee with him and we'd chat and he would pick my brain. And there's lots of things that I tried to steer him towards saying, I don't think that's a good idea. And here's why. I always gave him reasons why. And I always gave him options because it doesn't do anybody any good, especially over 30 years of policing, that if you just tell somebody no, but you don't tell them what their options are, they can't digest that. So you have to be able to come up with options. So I gave him plenty of options and a reason why that his ideas or his thoughts were probably not going down the right path. And there were a variety of things along the way, the last 5, 6, 7 years that he's been around doing this, that it just hasn't worked out. Now, what I have noticed is that he doesn't like to listen, which is too bad for him. Because there are people, actually leaders within our police organization, who have tried to communicate emphatically with him about the right thing to do. They think that they're starting to gain ground, and then the political will swings the other way, and everything that they worked hard at is gone. And so the inconsistencies that he's created himself, and it's now to a point where unless he just steps forward and say, listen, I've made several mistakes along the way. We need to correct this problem. It has gotten too out of hand. And part of that is, the other part of that is Mike Schmidt, our DA.
Ugh.
Without being able to prosecute people for crimes, why wouldn't a protester go down?
Why wouldn't
200
you?
people go down, break windows, when nothing's going to happen to them.
No, it's a revolving door.
Nothing's going to happen to them. There's no accountability for the actions of folks who are causing violence and doing violence to protest violence. And so there's no recourse. And so these businesses, they're all moving out. And so you're going to be left with a bunch of boarded up buildings.
Yep.
And eerily so, Portland is going to be the next Detroit.
And you not
Portland
only
is absolutely going to be the next Detroit. And my understanding, and I have not been to Detroit, so I'm not bad talking Detroit, but my understanding is Detroit has revitalized itself tremendously from 10 years ago.
it has.
So can Portland do that? Yeah,
Well, it takes
they
time.
absolutely
Yeah.
can.
And it
But
absolutely.
we're set back a decade or more right now. But
Yep.
until we get some sort of bite with prosecution that sticks to folks to curb their behavior, nothing's going to change.
We're getting, first of all, we're getting a lot of great comments on YouTube, which is really nice, and people are really interested in what you have to say. Will you join us tomorrow if we do a clubhouse chat and we can have some people ask questions?
Sure. I'd be more than happy to join.
And we'll talk about that in a second when we let Brett go. But I will say, Portland had a real interesting and fast little renaissance there from about 2000 to about 2016. It really was like was like a young colt just like running into the future, and it has just completely stumbled and broken both, forelegs. And you're not only losing the businesses, you're losing the brain trust and you're losing the talent. It's sort of like, what happened in the Bay Area with an Elon Musk saying like, well, you don't want me here, I'll ditch, I'm going to Texas. We've had a lot of people that just said, you're not making it. I don't want to put my energies and my finances here anymore because there's no point. I have to deal with a broken window every 3 weeks or being whatever. Brett, thank you so much for talking to us, and we will we'll be in touch and tell you how we can hook up tomorrow.
That sounds wonderful.
Okay,
Have a
thanks.
great night.
Thanks, Brett. Be
Thank
safe.
you.
All right, bye-bye.
Wow.
Nancy deserves an award for holding her arm
I
up
know.
like that.
Look, hold on. Where's my big muscle now? Here. So that was interesting, and it's really edifying to see, like, the Derek Chauvin trial is the story of the night, and we know that, and we were both watching it and live tweeting it and everything. But my brain sort of goes to Portland and was interested in hearing about that.
But it's a good reflection, I think, of not all police officers think the same, but there's definitely something to be said about kind of hearing what it's like with the people who actually have to clean up the pieces, right? So at the end of the day, there are people beyond the politics who have to go and they have to answer the 911 calls and they have to stand in the front line, and they're being pulled in a million directions, and we do expect a level of service from them. So what is this doing to them? What is this doing to the level of policing that we're experiencing?
And we started this podcast by saying, like, if everything was super easy, if everything was black or white, you could understand everything. And wouldn't that be super
We would need
great?
police if everything was.
But that's not the way it is. And the stories we've been telling ourselves this year, where people want to defund the police or people are anti-activist. It's complicated, and I think we do need to listen to other people. That's what we're going to be doing. And in that vein, just sent Nancy a DM about the change in response to the verdict compared to the video. Great, I will look at that DM. So last Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, which we're going to be doing again tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern time, Yael and I had a clubhouse.
It was kind of like ad hoc, and
we just decided to sort of talk to some officers, and also we had and journalists, and sometimes these people are at loggerheads. Anyway, it turned out to be such an interesting and such a civil conversation, which Clubhouse really kind of can be. I've never been in a yelly Clubhouse. Someone said they've been in Clubhouses where people have yelled. I have
Clubhouse,
not.
As when I hear about a new social media channel, my first reaction is like, oh, I don't need another social media. But there's something very intimate about Clubhouse.
It is.
You use your real name, and it's kind of like an audio conference call in a way. And we had a few police officers, we had a few police executives,
journalists,
some journalists, and people were just, nobody was grandstanding, nobody was reading off talking points.
No.
There are no teleprompters. It was very real, authentic talk. I think we got some really nice feedback on Twitter from people saying, it was the first time they heard just policing being discussed very authentically. And I think that's what people need to hear, and it will, you'll leave with more questions than answers.
And I think that, for me, it's always been my objective, or just my desire, to have, people talking to each other and be parts of these conversations. So, okay, tomorrow night, Clubhouse, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're not on Clubhouse and you have an iPhone, send me a DM or a DM.
We have invites.
We've got some invites we can give you. You do need an iPhone. I use an old iPad because I don't have an iPhone.
Yeah, if Nancy can do it with an Android off an old iPad, everybody can figure it out.
With one little finger. I want to thank you guys for joining us here at Plano Media tonight. And our first Facebook Live, and and of course we're going to decline that call. It's my mother calling. I see I've got my a cousin of mine and my old friend Ray Palestino watching on Facebook. Hi guys, thank you. It's my first Facebook Live.
We're trying to get.
She's dragging me into Facebook again.
I know. I feel bad, but we
okay.
want to get to new people. We know a lot of you people. I think Nancy knows a lot of you people. Facebook, is the biggest platform in the world. So follow Nancy on Facebook, Nancy.Rommelman.
Yeah, and follow us each on Twitter. I'm Nancy Rom, NancyRomm on Twitter.
I'm LBT. I tweet a lot about police and puppies. So,
Yeah.
pick
What's
your
not to like,
poison.
right? Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And let us know if you want to join us on Clubhouse tomorrow night or just show up. Okay, bye.
Bye.
It's one goodbye
And one goodbye.
and then the second. Thanks, guys.